Welcome back. So we're faced with a dilemma. All right, I get it. I got that thing. I pick up a drink, I can't stop. It's like for me to pick up a drink, it's like having sex with a gorilla. I ain't done till the gorilla's done. You know what I mean? It's just like no matter what you tell yourself, you can say all night long, me and the gorilla are just gonna have a dance. No, you're not. I unleash something through this allergic reaction to alcohol. As the alcohol starts to hit me, I break out in an irresistible yearning for more. And consequently, I will eventually burn my life to the ground. Because when you can't get enough, you always end up with too much. And yet, I enter into abstinence because I'm not stupid. I mean, I get it. I understand that I got to quit drinking. I understand that this is hurting me. I understand it's breaking the hearts of the people that love me. I get it. And then I enter into a state of abstinence, and the alcoholism kicks in, and it's restless, irritable discontent. And it starts to wear on me day in and day out and week in and week out. And abstinence starts to feel like I'm doing time. And I heard my sponsor say many years ago, it's like it's your life. If you're untreated alcoholism, sober is like a life is like a long gray tunnel. Then about once a year, a trap door in the roof of the tunnel opens up and a birthday cake comes down. You blow the candle up and then it just goes back up again and back to the long gray tunnel. It's like, is this it? I've heard guys in meetings just say, I'm going to meetings, I'm sober 2 years, is this it? And because they haven't done anything to treat their being, the thing that gets sick once we enter into a state of abstinence. And what happens? You think, well, for God's sakes, you almost killed yourself, you ruined your life, you hurt everybody. You just have to remember that. But you can't, can you? On page 24, and there's a paragraph in italics that really nails the part of the problem. The reason that we can't remember, no matter how much we tell ourselves, we're never going to touch that again. I have no mental defense. And it says, the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice and drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. I'm just curious. Can I see the hands of people besides myself here who have gotten to a point where you knew that you can't keep doing this and you swore to yourself you're never going to touch it again and then went back to it? Anybody besides me? Wow. So there's something wrong with us. You know it's going to kill you. You swore you're never going to do it again. And you make the decision in a clear-headed sobriety that you're going to do it again. That's crazy. And here's what happens. It says we are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We were without defense against the first drink. What's that mean? All right, I'm in a treatment center. I'm in detox, and oh God, I hate it. I'm here again, for God's sake, again. And I'm never going to do this. And this is horrible. How could I have done this to myself again? I am never, ever doing this again. And I mean it with every fiber of my being. And then what happens? My resolve and the power of the pain, the memory of that pain is like smoke in the wind, and it starts to dissipate in time. It starts to evaporate. It's a woman in AA years ago told me, she said that the way the pain, the memory of the pain disappears and starts to shift from being experiential, where you're never going to touch that again, to cognizant, where you remember it in a vague way that means nothing. Is very much, she said, that what happened to her and a lot of women with childbirth. She said if a woman could experientially bring back the pain of childbirth, she would never do that again. But she says after a time, you can't really get your mind around how painful that was. And you see the cute little babies and you start having a conversation with yourself. That wasn't so bad. And only in us, it's not babies. It's us. We're restless. We're irritable and we're discontent. We don't fit anywhere and everybody else is having fun and then there's us. And we see the guys at work talking about the party they went to the night before and trying to remember why I'm not drinking. And I got a little bit of a vague intellectual thing, and it's getting hazier and hazier. And I think the dynamic of what starts the deterioration of my spiritual condition into greater restless, irritable discontent, more depression, more anxiety and angst and worry, as that's occurring, at the same time, the memory of the pain is starting to evaporate. If you were to measure your commitment and ability to carry it out to your own abstinence the day you checked into a detox, my God, on that day, you're never going to drink again. Your commitment and your abstinence, and it's like if it was a balance scale, it'd have amazing weight. Weigh that thing down. On the other side, up here, light, vague, some restless, irritable discontent, maybe some feelings of not fitting a little, but really nothing to, oh my God. And then what happens as time goes on, it's like my sponsor says, it's like a spring is put in the middle of your gut and life itself starts to tighten it up. And taxes and traffic and the boss and kids and the stupid sharing in that meeting and just your sponsor, he's butting into you, just tighten it up. And I'm becoming progressively more restless, irritable, and discontent. But it's so vague, I can't really put my finger on it. It's like little ants. Nothing big. And on the other end, the memory of the pain is getting vaguer and hazier, and it's losing weight. The weight that at one time committed you to never drink again. And this is the restless, irritable, and discontent is getting more pronounced, and this starts to shift the balance scale. Gets to about right here, even. You can walk up to a guy, and I've had this experience. How you doing with your sobriety? And you kind of know because they're not working the steps. All they're doing is not drinking and going to meetings. So you know they're on borrowed time. How you doing? Oh man, I'm doing good. I'm really grateful. I have my job. I got my wife. Everything's good. I'm never going to drink again. And a week later, it shifts enough, and they pick up a drink. The week before, they never thought they would ever drink again. And you can't. There's no mental defense against that. The only hope is to find a way to treat my spiritual condition so the scale doesn't tip like that. And that really brings me to the crux of the problem. In the beginning of the chapter, We Agnostics, it talks about something that really nails it. I'll tell you a little story. Almost 7 years of relapsing in Alcoholics Anonymous with various lengths of sobriety, with a lot of therapy. Matter of fact, I was a therapist at one time. I tell you, and I was very good at it right up to the day I lost the job for being drunk on the job. Because I think knowledge is power. Knowledge is not power. And I thought if I, working in the field as a substance abuse counselor, surely then I will have arrived. Knowledge is not power. I tried everything in those years. And it's funny, in 1978, on my last drunk, when I was standing on that bridge trying to get up enough courage to kill myself, if someone would have come along and said, Bob, why don't you try AA? I would have said, try AA. I've been to probably 200 meetings, for God's sakes. I did AA. Didn't work. I never did AA. I just sat in meetings and tried not to drink. You can sit in a chicken coop, don't make you a chicken. Sit in AA meetings, don't make you sober. Spirit doesn't change your spiritual condition. And I heard this story 30-some years ago, and it rings true today. There was this little kid. He lived out in the farm with his folks, and they were very, very principled, very cool family. And the kid's help doing his chores. And one of the things he's doing is he's out in the front part of the property mending the fence along the highway in the front of the farm. And he looks up, and on a telephone pole is this big, bright, neon yellow poster, and it says circus coming to town. And it has a date, and it's $1 admission, and on the posters, these outrageously looking clowns and all these crazy animals, elephants and tigers and just all kinds of stuff. And he doesn't know what a circus is, but this little kid looking at it, man, he thinks, this is cool. And he runs back to the house and he says, Papa, there's a circus coming to town. If I do my chores, can I have $1 and go to the circus? And his dad said, well, of course, son. And man, the day of the circus comes and that kid's up before the sun. He's so excited, he can't sleep. He can't wait to go see the circus thing, whatever it is. And his dad gives him a $1 and he runs into town and he gets there and it's a ways into town. He gets there and there's this big crowd up on the main street along the street. Because he's a little kid, he kind of wiggles his way up through the crowd, gets right up to the curb, looks down the street, and here comes this parade. And leading the parade is a whole bunch of clowns, and they're dressed in outrageous, brightly colored costumes and crazy hair and shoes and just wacko-looking stuff. You've never seen anything like this. They're juggling things that look like bowling pins, and it's just amazing. Behind the clowns, there are these beautiful white horses with these women are standing on the backs of the horses with these sequenced, feathered outfits, sparkly, unlike anything. You've never seen nothing like it. Behind that are there's a wagon with giraffes' necks sticking out at the top of it. And then there's a wagon with lions and then tigers and bears. Oh my. And then elephants with people sitting on the top of the elephants, and then more clowns and more animals and more wagons. And this kid is amazed. He's never seen anything like it. At the very end of the parade, there's this little clown. He's dancing down behind the last wagon, he's just dancing, and the kid shows him the $1 and the clown tips his hat. He throws the $1 to the clown, he catches it in his hat and dances down the street. And he runs home to tell his dad about the circus. The sad thing is he's never seen the circus. He's never been in the big top. All he saw was the passing parade. There's a passing parade in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's been since the beginning of time, since their first days. People who go through here on their way to the graveyard and they don't know it. And they're not bad people, and it's not out of malice. It's out of inaction. In the beginning of chapter 5, it'll tell you exactly who's going to recover and who's not, who's going to make it and who's not. It says those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely is like more than half, completely give themselves to this simple program. And you know something? I've never been more serious about abstinence as I was in the years that I was relapsing myself to death. And I didn't know. I didn't even know what it meant to go to any lengths. I didn't even know what it meant to completely get. I thought trying not to drink and seeing a counselor and going to meetings was giving. I thought I was doing AA. I didn't know. I mean, it's funny how you could be part of a 12-step program and not entertain the possibility of the 12 steps. I mean, and yet there were times I thought I did the 12 steps in treatment centers. They take you through some of these bizarre variations of the 12 steps. I wrote out this thing. I thought it was a 4th step. It was really like a written 1st step. It had nothing to do with resentments, fears, sex conduct. It had nothing to do with anything that we do. I didn't learn nothing. Nothing changed as a result of it. And the problem is that I thought that I'd done AA. And I was dying out of ignorance, not out of malice. I would put my intentions up against anyone's. I just didn't know. And I couldn't get a sponsor because you can't tell me anything. I could get a guy to talk to, and it was like my sounding board. but I was still self-directed. My life was still in the hands of the guy who's screwing it up. And that guy couldn't do it. In 1978, I didn't know it, but my actions started reflecting some kind of movement. That I'd actually moved out of the group that wouldn't completely give themselves to this simple program. And I got into the group that was just on fire with AA. You know, the people you don't like when you're not doing AA? You know, the fanatical people, the ones you judge heavily. I joined them. I know it's pathetic, isn't it? Oh, it's horrible. I joined the people I judged so harshly around this program for years. The ones that did all the 12-step work in the service and talked about the step. I became, oh God, I was becoming one of them. Ooh. What my buddies back in detox think. Oh, they're drunk. They wouldn't think much, I don't think. And my life started to change. I ran into this barrier with God. You know, our book talks a lot about the prejudices that separate me from God. That some of them are so subtle and unconscious, and yet they drive me and dominate me. I never could put it into words. And I heard people in AA talk about their experience with God and their prejudices and the blocks, things that block them from God. And I could find my own by listening to yours. I went to, as a kid in Catholic school, I listened with the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I didn't hear what the other kids heard. I went to school with kids that heard about a God that loved them, they could count on. I didn't hear about that. I don't listen for the good stuff. I listen for the stuff I have to defend myself against. I heard about a God who exists, it seemed to me, existed to judge me. And he could see in the dark. That's not good. That's really hideous. He could read my mind, they said. And the nuns used to, I remember this one nun, she just used this saying over and over again. I swear to God, she'd look at me when she'd say, "You must be pure of thought, word, and deed." She was kind of a young nun. The minute she said pure of thought, I'd start imagining what she looked like under the habit. And I'd go, oh no, oh, I'm going to hell a lot for that. Oh my God, I couldn't. Did you ever have bad thoughts and then try not to think them? Oh, I think them more. I got two movies that run in my head. One's sex and the other's violence. I mean, you know, I have this idea of God that not only do you have to be good, you can't even think wrong. Oh my God, I'm always thinking wrong. And so what happens? I'm afraid. My prejudice, here's my prejudice, is that I secretly believe that I'm not good enough for God. I'm just too bad at being good and too good at being bad. And so I am the type of person, to this day, I have this inclination. If I just suspect that you don't like me, I'm going to not like you first. And so I threw God out. Why? Because I'm afraid. Now, I wouldn't have told you that. I went through periods of tremendous intellectual arguments about why there's no, all that crap. The real truth is I'm afraid. I'm afraid I don't measure up. If there is a God, I'm out of the game here. I ain't good enough. But the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous is I came here and you didn't tell me I had to believe anything. You asked me to take certain actions and see what happens. You allowed me to have my own experience. In the last 33 and a half years, I guess, I've traveled all over the world. I tell you, I met men and women in various countries and cultures that knew nothing about the Bible, that were Muslims, Shintos, Buddhists, Hindus, Jews, atheists, agnostics, regardless of where they came from, regardless of what they thought and believed, every single one of them, without exception, who's bought the whole package, had an experience. And they came to call it in some form or other God. They came to tap in with something. And some of them will match it up with the religion of their childhood, and some of them don't. I know a guy that's sober 25 years. He still calls it the Force from Star Wars. Because he still has all that adamancy about his childhood religion. Yeah, you're going to say that. But his life has changed as a result of taking the actions. It is self-evident that he has accessed something. It's undisputable. And that's really the problem, isn't it? We have to access it. You know, for thousands of years, alcoholics of our type have been dying in church. Not out of malice. William James, in his book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, talks about us that have these religious experiences, and then they dissipate. They evaporate in time. And the old personality returns, and we drink again. I mean, there's one time I was doing a workshop 15 years ago on step 2, and on a fluke, I just said, can I see a show of hands of people who have had born again, got saved, spiritual, religious experiences, then drank again after that experience? And over a third of the room raised their hand. I mean, we know what it's like to beg God for help and not get it. I've had the occasion to sponsor 4 Men of the Cloth over the years. I tell you, they're hard to sponsor. It's like sponsoring an alcoholism counselor. They know everything. They're very difficult to sponsor. Two of them drank themselves to death. Now, I'm not talking about deviant priests. These were good guys. I was only sober a couple years and I had a crack at this one guy, Frank, and I wasn't the only guy that ever sponsored him. And I liked him. He was a good guy. And he called me up. He'd been sober a little while, and he went back to drinking. And he called me up, and he's sobbing into the phone because he feels so horrible now that he's drinking. He's lost his sobriety, and he's in this desolation, and he doesn't understand what happened. Because here, for God's sakes, here's a man who prays more in one day than most of us pray in a week, who reads more spiritual literature in one day than most of us will read in a week, who's asking God to keep him sober, and he's back to drinking again, and he goes to AA meetings where there's drug dealers and prostitutes and the most dregs of the earth that are staying sober, seem for a lifetime. And here's a man of God who's dedicated his whole life to serving God, and he's drinking, and he doesn't. It just blows his mind. He doesn't get it. He thinks, and I tell you something. I'm listening to him, and I don't get it either. Because by this time, I'm sober long enough to know something. And what I know is I am sober only through the grace of God. Well, if that's true, then you'd think that we're not talking about a deviant priest. This is a good guy. You'd think that Frank would have a leg up on a bum like me. I mean, I would think so. And a week later, he was dead. He literally drank himself to death. It blew my mind. I mean, he had tremendous faith. I used to love to talk to him. He could tell you all this stuff about Scripture and other religions, and he had tremendous intellectual knowledge of God. I mean, it was amazing. And he's dead. I wish that was the only case I've seen. I've seen probably 100. Page 45, it talks about the problem. It says lack of power. That was our dilemma. It's not lack of religion. It's not even lack of faith. Alcoholics for centuries have had tremendous faith in God and can't stay sober and literally relapse themselves to death. It's lack of power. You know, we talk about something in AA I don't know that it's unique, but we talk about it a lot. It's called conscious contact. And there's a world of difference between conscious contact and faith. All of you who drove here, when you leave, you'll go get in your car and you'll drive down the street with absolute faith that there are traffic laws and there's cops to enforce them. And that faith will alter your behavior behind the wheel of the car. And probably, may or not, but you probably will be influenced by that. Your faith in the traffic laws and the cops existing will get you to drive a certain way. Faith is great. But you get a cop in your rearview mirror with his lights on, you've got conscious contact. And one is right here, right now in your reality, and the other one is of your head. And I got to tell you something. Sometimes head stuff is good for a lot of people, but it ain't enough for us. I got to have intermittent conscious contact and experiential relationship with God. And I say intermittent because I don't know anyone that gets plugged in and stays plugged in. It comes and goes like the tides. But I must seek. I find it, I fill up with myself and I lose it. And I find it and fill up with myself and I lose it. But I'm in the game. And I'm a seeker. Because once you taste that, you don't want anything else. So lack of power, that was our dilemma. I live in a city in the desert, Las Vegas. I really like living there. Over the years, being a songwriter and involved in some TV stuff, I thought about moving to different cities where I like living in Las Vegas. When you understand that 12-step work is your primary purpose and helping drunks is your primary purpose, Las Vegas is a target-rich environment. I'm telling you. Oh my God, it's like the jackpot city, and it's I love living there. And if you were to come and visit me in the summer, which is not the best time to come, but you can come in the summer, and you could come in July and August, and there are days. Not so much like the old days. There used to get over 120 degrees a day sometimes. It doesn't do that anymore for some reason. Our climate is it's not like it used to be. It's changed somewhat. But we still get an occasional 115 degree day. Now, the 115 degrees is hot. The Chamber of Commerce will tell you it's a dry heat. So is hell. It's hot. It's hot. And if you were to come and visit me when it's 115 degrees, I could stick you in my car, drive you outside of town, take you to one of the largest bodies of fresh water in the western United States, Lake Mead. Huge lake. Drive you right up to the edge of that lake, let you out, let you drink some of the water, let you jump in the water, get soaking wet, swim around in that water, stick you back in my car, you're soaking wet, drive you 10 minutes out in the desert, drop you off in the middle of the desert with a map, with 9 steps of directions how to get back to that lake so you don't die of thirst. And if you don't follow the directions on how to get back to that lake and get to that water, you will die of thirst with absolute faith that the water's there. And Frank died knowing God was there. The problem is he couldn't access the grace. And that's the problem. It's not enough to know God's there and know God's the answer if I don't access God in my life. And the problem is for guys like me, because I'm an extreme example, because I'm of self-will run riot, I'm an extreme example of self-concern and obsessive self-focus, and I'm self-absorbed and wrapped up in myself. There's too much of me between me and God. So we're going to enter into a process that's designed to shrink Bob so God can show up. And I access God's grace and I develop a conscious contact through self-abandonment and service and cleaning out the me that's between me and you and me and God. And lack of power really is my dilemma. I just a couple of years ago, I buried a guy who was very prominent in a Christian church. He was a deacon there, and it was a Christian church that had developed their own method for the 12 steps. And he was one of the teachers he did step workshops there. But they weren't our steps. They had agendized them to match, to fit their religion. And This guy had tremendous faith in God. But he didn't have what was necessary. And he wouldn't do what we do. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do what we do. Frank, the priest who drank himself to death, wouldn't do what we do. He didn't need to. Everything in him told him his case was different. Isn't that odd? Even after 4 or 5 years of relapsing, finally getting to a point where I could concede that I was an alcoholic of sorts. I knew that once I started drinking, I couldn't stop. Even then, because of the way I obsessively stare at my own emotions and thoughts inside me, even after I can admit that I'm an alcoholic, I suspected that I was a special kind of alcoholic. I'm not like you. I had evidence. I know I'm not like you. Look at you. Then I look at me. Doesn't match. Doesn't match. So lack of power, that was our dilemma. So how do we start to access the power? Well, on page 46, it talks about two things, two very simple things, that if I can do these, I'm going to start moving down this road. And they're simple but not easy. And then right in the middle of the page, in the third line in the middle paragraph, it says, we found as soon as we were able to first, and here's the first thing, lay aside prejudice. Well, what's that mean? When it talks about all our old ideas, what the problem with me is, and prejudice, is I have all these prejudices and it never occurs to me that they're prejudices. It's not a prejudice, that's the way it is. The ego is so defensive. The ego, there was a great psychiatrist, Abe Torsky, who worked in the field of alcoholism in Pennsylvania for probably 40 years, a remarkable man. And he said one time that the reason that very few of us ever get better and recover, even though some of us will find, decades of abstinence, and the reason we don't get any better is that we're so ego-dominant, so self-dominant, that we have this absolute inability to listen to anyone to hear anything new. I can only listen to see how I'm already right. And if you're like that, you're a closed system. Nothing new gets in because you're too defended. Nothing new gets in, nothing new gets in, nothing changes, nothing changes, nothing changes. I had a friend, 31 and a half years sober, it killed him, so blew his brains out. And the last 7, 8 years, you couldn't even talk to him. He would tell you what's wrong with his life and everything around him. You couldn't make a suggestion. He would shoot suggestions down like one of those anti-ballistic missiles and stuff. Nothing gets through to him. So the book's asking me to lay aside my prejudice. What it's really saying is, can I put everything aside that I think I know? Can I become childlike? Can I get humble enough to know the most important thing I would ever know is that I don't know? And we're going to enter into a process in step 4 where we're going to start to see point blank how wrong my perception and opinions and judgments have been throughout my whole life. But for right now, can I just lay these aside? Because I don't have the presence of mind to ascertain what's good and what's bad. Just lay them aside. Become childlike. You don't know nothing. And, I work with a lot of guys, and one of the prejudices that's so common in all of us, and it's not cognizant, which makes it more hideous because it works on us an emotional level. And that is the feeling or the sense that on our very worst day, you're sober 5 years and you just did something that you're very ashamed of. You're very ashamed of it. You don't know, oh my God, why did I do that? You're just really ashamed of yourself. Maybe Maybe you flipped out on one of your kids and beat one of your kids and you're just in a rage and you just, oh my God, why did I do that? Or you cheated on your husband or wife. Or you did some sleazy stuff with money and you don't want anybody to know it. On those moments where you loathe yourself the most, the prejudice is that I don't really feel like God would be there for me now. Now, it doesn't matter that intellectually you know God loves you. Father Martin one time said, when intellect and emotion are in conflict with each other, emotion always wins because it's stronger and it's more persistent and it wears on you. And that is such a common prejudice in us, and is this lurking idea that to some degree I have to merit God's grace and help. Or that I could be bad enough to put me beyond His help. Now, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, I know intellectually, that that's not true. And the reason that's a hideous prejudice is there's never a time in my sobriety where I will need God more than when I've done something that's hard for me to forgive myself for. That's when I need His grace the most. And the problem is I will turn from the light because of my feeling about it. I was over in Florence a few years ago, and I saw this statue in one of the museums. I went there on purpose to see this because my friend Jim told me, he'd seen it and told me about it, and I really wanted to see it. And it's a statue by the Renaissance sculptor Donatello. It's of the Mary Magdalene. It's in the Opry behind the Duomo in the center of Florence. And I walked into this museum, and I'm going from room to room searching out, trying to find this one particular statue. And I walked into a room, and there it was. And the minute I saw it, it like caught my breath. It's a remarkable statue, and it's life size, and it's a depiction of Mary Magdalene that is different than anything I'd ever seen. Anything, not even. This is not a woman that's pretty with long flowing hair, red hair, and robes like you see in some of the Renaissance paintings. This is a statue of a woman with malnutrition who's dressed in dirty, filthy, tattered wet rags. A woman who has been beaten repeatedly. A woman that has a countenance of shame and hopeless remorse on her face. I remember looking at her and realizing that not only she'd been beaten so bad that somebody had kicked her teeth out, and she had these little broken, chipped stubs for teeth. And she's standing there, and her head's cocked, and in the middle of this sense of hopeless remorse, she's got her hands like this, not in prayer. There is a hesitancy in her hands as if she doesn't deserve to pray. And she's looking up, and I look, and she's looking across, and on the other wall is a life-size depiction of Christ on the cross. And she's looking out into space, or they've positioned it to make it look like she's looking at the crucifix. And she has a look on her face as if she's saying, this could be for me? And I saw that in the broken, kicked-in teeth, and I just started weeping. I stood and I am not a public crier, but I stood in a public museum, and I couldn't help myself. I just started weeping. Because I looked at her and I saw my soul. I saw the guy who came to Alcoholics Anonymous after hurting everybody who ever loved him. The guy who came to Alcoholics Anonymous, who crossed every line that as I crossed it, I hated myself a little bit more. And I think we all come to God like that. Some of us, and I've heard, I can't even tell you how many fifth steps, probably close to 200, maybe more. I don't know. I hear a lot of them. We all have something, don't we? We all have a lot of things, but we all usually have one or two things. Maybe you rolled on some people and they went to prison. Or maybe in a drunken rage you beat your kids. Maybe you still see that look of fear and terror in their eyes. Maybe you had a dog that loved you and it came up to lick your face one time on a day that you really especially hated yourself, and you beat the dog because you hated anything or anyone that would love the person you hated the most. Maybe you stole from some place and you let somebody else take the blame, and it ruined their life. Maybe you've had sex that you just wouldn't want, the kind of sleazy, the kind of embarrassing, shameful stuff you don't want anybody to know about. We don't know what you got. We just know that you got it. We all carry something in here, and it sets us apart and convinces me that my case is different. And it affects my ability to turn to God. That's why my only hope is to start this process of the steps to clear away these things between me and God so I can access the power and the grace. It's my only hope. And then the second thing, after setting aside the prejudice, it says if we can express even a willingness to believe. And the book says, if we can do those two things, lay aside our prejudice and express a willingness, it guarantees we will commence to get results. And the old-timers in Alcoholics Anonymous, they had me acting as if God existed. Now, I don't believe in God. I'm afraid of God. I secretly suspect that if there was a God, I am in a lot of trouble. But they said, just forget all that. And they told me when I was brand new, one of the things they told me to do was to physically get down on my knees in the morning and ask whatever was running the universe. And they didn't even make me use the word God because they knew how I was. It took me a little while before I could use the word God. They said, just ask whatever's running the universe for help. Get back down on your knees at night. Thank whatever that was. And then eventually they gave me some other prayers to add in there. I started doing it. I was living in a men's halfway house, and 6 guys in a room in bunk beds, and I am not going to pray in front of them. So I go in the bathroom and lock the door. I take the throw rug and put it up against the crack under the door so nobody can peek under there and see me pray. I mean, I'm nuts. I'm embarrassed to pray. I mean, it feels horrible to me. I felt like a hypocrite. After the first time I did it, I went and told this guy, I said, I don't even believe in God. I shouldn't be praying. I feel like a hypocrite. You know what he said to me? He said, hey, you've been a hypocrite all your life. What's the difference? He said, just do it. Just do it. And they were entering me into what a scientist would consider a working hypothesis. They're presenting me with an idea that I don't believe in, that there's, in the very fabric of the universe, there's a power source that waits to help me, that adores me, that loves me. I don't believe that. There's nothing in my life that would suggest that. I'm the guy, I'm the bad luck magnet. There's nothing in the universe trying to help me. I don't believe it, but they said it's okay. Let's start positioning yourself in life as if it exists, and let's see what happens. So I started every morning and every night turning my attention. They told me I'd call my sponsor up with a problem in the middle of the day. He'd say, take a minute and talk to God about it. Just do it. Okay. And a series of bizarre coincidences started happening in my life. The crazy stuff started occurring. My home group had a phone list, maybe 2 pages, maybe 40 some names, I guess. I had times when I'd be sinking into a depression. I'm screwed up. I don't even know what's wrong. And somebody in my home group I'm not talking one of my best friends here, just somebody in the group who could not get a hold of their sponsor, picked my number out of 2 pages of numbers and called me at the exact moment I needed to talk to somebody. I would go to meetings and I'd be just emotionally just messed up about something, and I don't even understand what's going on. There'd be some stranger in the room talking about what's going on with me. It was unbelievable. All of a sudden, I'm having good luck. I mean, I got the perfect job for me. Not the one I wanted. God had that. But the one that was just ideal for my recovery. It was perfect. Just these coincidences started happening. I remember one time I couldn't pay the electric bill. And somebody in AA anonymously who was trying to make a blanket amends to the universe went down and paid my electric bill the day before they were going to turn it off. Another time I went into work in the morning and I walked in there and my boss jumped me and disrespected me. Now, I'm sober a little while. I'm sober long enough to have enough self-esteem to be dangerous. And I got my rights back. And when you get your rights back, you're puffed up with yourself. You're easily offended. And he disrespected me. And I tell you, I was so mad. I would have hit him, except he's an ex-Golden Gloves champion. And I'm angry, not stupid. But I'm going to quit my job. And he disrespected me and left. He won't be back till later in the afternoon. Well, I can't just walk off the job now because I got to, you know how it is. You got to say a few things to him before you leave. You know how that is, right? You got to let him know how stupid you think he is before you leave. And so I'm stuck and I'm just chewing on this. And the more, I'm one of those kind of guys, the more I chew on something like that, the angrier I get, the stronger, more I focus on it, the bigger it gets. I just blow it up. My head's like a magnifying glass. Just blows this stuff up. And it's driving me crazy. And right about the time I take my lunch break, this thought comes into me from down in here. And the thought is, hey, you better don't go to the lunch counter. Go to a noon meeting. And I thought, okay. And I went and I got in my car, raced across town, went to this noon meeting. The meeting already started. I hate walking into meetings late. I walked in, I settled down, and as my head started to adjust to the meeting again, a guy started sharing a story. And he was talking about how his boss had asked him to do something, and he didn't do it because he was busy doing what he wanted to do. And when he came into work, and his boss jumped him for not following directions, and he got pissed, and he wanted to quit his job, and he talked to his sponsor, and his sponsor said, you were wrong, and your boss was right. You need to make amends to your boss. And I'm sitting there, and that's exactly what had happened to me. And I'm sitting there, and I'm realizing I had to go back and make amends to my boss. My head's just balking. My head's going, yeah, but he didn't say, he shouldn't have said to talk to you that way. But the truth was, he'd asked me to do something the day before, and I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to spend the extra time. I was in a hurry. I wanted to leave work a little early to do what I wanted to do. And I didn't do it. And when I came in the next morning, he jumped me about it. And which he did, wasn't mean about it, but when he asked me about it, I started giving him BS excuses, which I have down to an art form, excuses. And it aggravated him, and that's when he jumped me. And I was sitting there, I realized, oh my God, I got to go back to work and make amends to my boss. And I went back, and first thing I did when I got back was the thing he wanted me to do. I made sure it was done perfect, and he came back later that afternoon, and I went right up to him, and I was embarrassed. I was scared to talk to him. I went up to him. I said, Art, I'm sorry. I was really wrong. I was out of line. When you asked me to do that, I didn't do it, and then when you asked me about it this morning, I just gave you a bunch of crap and excuses, and I was out of line. It's done exactly the way you want it done. I am sorry. And he put his arm around me. He said, hey, kid, we all make mistakes. Went and told me a story about something he did when he first got into the business and how he'd made a mistake. And the job that I hated and wanted to quit like that became one of the nicest places to work on the planet. Now, the question is, who's the choreographer? Who's getting all this lined up here? And I started to do something that is not the end game here. It is only the very, very beginning as I started to come to believe that there was actually something here that was helping me. There was some sort of power in the universe that was on my side. I didn't understand it, but I could not ignore the results of these simple actions. And I'm taking them, and I don't even believe in God. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I love to tell this story. I heard this, my sponsor told this back in 1980 at the International. You see, when you hit a bottom, this is so right on the money. When you hit a bottom with alcoholism, it's like being shipwrecked in the middle of the ocean. You're out in the middle of nowhere all by yourself. It's horrible. It's frightening. And eventually, if something doesn't happen, you're gonna drown and die. And you're getting tired treading water. And all of a sudden, here come these. You're looking. You don't understand what you're seeing. It's like these two goofy-looking guys in an invisible boat. And they're just sitting on top of the water, moving across. It's like the craziest thing. And they're pretending like they're rowing something. And they come up, row up to you, and they go, my name's Bill. My name's Bob. We're from Alcoholics Anonymous. We got God and these wonderful 12 steps, and they'll solve all your problems. And you look and you go, you got nothing. Get away from me. You guys are deluded. God, get away. Stop it. Get away. And they row off, and now you're in trouble. You're alone again. And just about the time you're about ready to go under, here comes this giant chrome ocean liner. It says treatment center. And they have psychiatrists and psychologists and nurses and biofeedback technicians and vocational rehabilitation specialists and all the things that you secretly suspect a person of your depth really needs. And you get on board, and it's fascinating. You're learning, you're cracking the secrets of your psyche, and you're learning about all this stuff, and this is amazing. 28 days later, over the side. And there you are treading water as you watch this ship go out to sea, and you're by yourself. And you don't know how much longer you can hang in. And you're starting to suspect you can't do this very much longer. And about the time you're ready to go down, here come those two assholes in that invisible boat. My name's Bill. My name's Bob. We're from Alcoholics Anonymous. We got God, these beautiful 12 steps, solve all your problems. And you go, man, you got nothing. You guys are, what's crazy? And if you're lucky, they pull you on board. And there you are. You're sitting on top of the water. You don't even know how you're sitting there. There's no boat. There's nothing. You're just sitting there. As some of us sit with 8 and 10 and 12 months sober. We realize we're sober longer than we'd ever been since the first time we drank. But we don't know how this is happening. And you go, what do you do? They say, well, row. Row what? Well, just pretend you're rowing. And the funniest thing is, you start to row that boat, and it starts to materialize. And the more you row it, the more substantial it becomes. And unfortunately, some of us that have been in the boat for 10, 15, 20 years, we think we don't have to row anymore, and we stop, and it starts to disappear. This is the only place I've ever come to where I didn't have to believe in anything. I just had to do some stuff. If I can just take certain actions as if this thing works, to my amazement, I find out that the power really is there. It really is there. I was over in about once every year. This year I'm not going because I'm going to Australia, but I used to go once every summer to England for a couple of weeks and do some of these weekends. First time I ever went over there, I noticed something down in Westminster. Some of you may have been to England. In the Westminster section of London, that's down around Hyde Park and Trafalgar Square and the Parliament and Buckingham Palace. Most of those streets, the street lights are gas, unlike ours are electric. And they're kind of a nice style to them. And I noticed that on the side of most of the poles was like a black box that kind of stuck out with a little door on the side of the box, but it was welded shut and painted over like years before. And years before they had the technology of the electric starters and the computerized deal that turns all the gas on and then lights them automatically, they used to have a guy whose job it was to go up and down the streets of London at night when the sun's starting to go down with a key, and he'd open that little door and he'd stick that key and he'd turn the gas on. And he'd reach up with this long pole with a flame on the end and he'd light the street light. And you could climb up to the top of the highest building in London at twilight and look out over the city, and you couldn't see where the guy was, but you could see where he'd been. And I could sit in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous at 2 years sober as a result of the actions I was taking. And I couldn't see where God was at that moment. But my God, I could see where he'd been. You guys had pushed me into 12-step work. I was sponsoring guys. I got to get a ringside seat to be up close and personal with watching the hand of God work in the people I was trying to help. If you really want to see God up close and personal, start to help his kids. And you'll not only see God work in their lives, you'll see at times how he'll work through you to help them. You want to get to know God, get to know his kids. And I started to realize, and the only way a guy like me, I started to come to believe from my very experience that this is not fantasy. This is reality here. Matter of fact, later in the book, it calls it the great reality. And it's deep down within us. And what an amazing, amazing thing. When I was in detox the last time in 1978, there was a woman who worked in there who was also a member of what would become my first home group. And her name was Judy Harris. And Judy was a counselor at the detox and also a member of AA. And Judy was my counselor in the detox. And Judy knew everything about me. You know how they do a history on you. They do everything. And I talked a lot. I really liked talking to her. And I held nothing back. She knew everything about me. I'm about 3 months sober, I suppose. And I run into her at a meeting one night. And she corners me. And she comes up to me and she says, "What happened to you?" What do you mean? What do you mean? She says, "What happened to you?" "Judy, I don't know what you mean." She says, "Well, I hear that you're a secretary of a meeting." "Oh, yeah, I am. I wasn't sober long enough. They had to vote me." "Yeah, I am. I wasn't supposed to be, but they did." The group called. Yeah. She says, "I hear you got a sponsor, Dick T." I said, "Yeah, oh, yeah, I do. Yeah, oh, he's good. You call him?" "Yeah, I call him every day." She says, "That's good." She said, I hear you started going with the guys that started the meeting at the state penitentiary out in Gene." I said, "Yeah, I did. Yeah." She said, I hear you're praying." Well, I was embarrassed. I said, yeah, I don't know if I believe in God. Yeah, I am. They got me praying. Yeah. She said, "Every time I'm leaving work, it seems like you're one of the guys bringing the meeting back into the detox." She said, "I've known you've been in treatment centers. You've been in 11 treatment centers. You've been around Alcoholics Anonymous for almost 7 years." She said, "What happened to you? You never did all this stuff before. What happened to you?" And I thought, oh my God, what happened to me? What did happen to me? Because it was crazy, because my last drunk was not my worst drunk. I mean, if there was going to be a drunk that would have snapped you into AA, I had some horrific ones that should have done it. I mean, I had some bad ones, man. Whoa, woke up in jail covered with blood. I mean, I had some horrible nightmare drunks. This was not like that. I mean, it was bad, but bad gets to be norm after a while. I mean, that's the worst thing in the progression of alcoholism. It gets worse and worse and worse. And then the worst thing of all happens is it gets the same. And it says, oh, jeez. It wasn't the worst one. And I thought, what happened to me? And it baffled me. I thought, what? And I thought about it. What was the difference between coming off this drunk? What was different? And I didn't know. And you know, when I came in off the streets in 1978, and people in Alcoholics Anonymous were very, very, very kind to me. AA is a fantastic place, and it's an unusual place. There's a tremendous amount of help here, but if you don't want it, we'll just watch you die. I mean, we respect your right to just say screw you and just die. I mean, they left me alone for years, and if you don't want to be part of this and you don't want help, people in AA will leave you alone. I mean, there might be somebody off their meds that won't, but for the most part, they'll just leave you alone. They'll respect that. You can sit there like, leave me alone. They'll leave you alone. But the moment you reach out for help, man, they're all over it. They're all over it in my life to this day. And people started taking me to meetings and helping me all kinds of ways. And one time I come out of a noon meeting and a guy at a restaurant, and a guy comes out to me. He says, "I need your help with something." I said, "Okay, Tim, what do you need?" He said, "My wife's really been on my back to clear out the closet and get rid of some of this stuff. And I got it all cleaned, dry cleaned and everything. I was wondering if you could help me out and please take some of this stuff off my hands." And he takes me out the trunk of his car. And he's got nice sport coats and slacks and shirt. And it all fits. It's all the same size. It's just from the dry cleaners. Beautiful stuff. Really nice stuff. And I look back now, he didn't need to. He just knew that if he tried to help me by saying, "You don't have anything, let me give you something," my ego would have rose up, because I'm a hard guy to help. But he presented it in such a way that like I'm helping him. I almost said, "She doesn't have a car you need to get rid of, dude." I didn't say that. But he also had a box of books in the trunk of the car. And he says, "I heard you say one time you like to read." And I do. I'm an avid reader. I read I read probably 2 books a week. And he said, "Here, these are novels. Just enjoyable reading, nothing fancy, not recovery, anything. You might want to read these." And I looked at them. Some of them were some science fiction and some mysteries and novels. And I thought, "Yeah, that's cool." I started reading one of the books he gave me. It was just a novel, but there was a part in there that captured my attention. And this little part of this one book, talking about these scientists that were fascinated with the human brain. And they were doing these experiments, and they discovered that in the human brain was a part, it had a long Latin name, but they referred to it in the book as the pleasure center. It's the part in the human brain that allows you to experience the euphoria from alcohol, drugs. It's where you get high. Without this, you're not going to get high, without this part of the brain. So what they did is they took these laboratory rats, and they put 2 tiny wire filaments into the pleasure center in the rat's brain. Then they'd pass a mild electric stimulus through those wires, and the rat would get high. So what they did is they hooked up the juice to a pedal in the rat's cage, and the rat would learn he could hit that pedal and get high. So the rat would just lay on the damn pedal. I mean, he don't sleep. He don't stop to drink water. He don't stop to eat. He don't stop for sex. Not now, baby. I'm partying. Leave me alone. He hits that pedal until he dies. Usually of a combination of dehydration and exhaustion. He dies. Well, the scientists in short order realized these rats they're killing themselves. So they started observing them, and they would start testing them. They'd hook them up to some wires, and when they'd see a rat was in danger of dying, they'd turn the juice off. Now that poor rat hits the pedal and nothing happens. He hits it again and nothing happens, and again and again and again and again. And after countless futile attempts to turn that juice on, the rat gets it. That once and for all, final, the party's over. And instead of being able to go back to being a rat, the rat curls up in a ball and lays on the floor of the cage to die. Because without the juice, what's the point? What's the point? And I'm reading that and I'm tearing up because I knew that's exactly what had happened to me. I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous. For sobriety, really? Not really. And I didn't come here for a spiritual way of life. I don't even believe in God, for God's sake. Come on. Matter of fact, if I'd have walked into my first meeting and a genie would have popped out of a bottle and gave me one wish, it wouldn't have been sobriety. If I had gotten one wish, I think I would have said, let me drink like I drank when I was 18 years old. Let me party like I partied when I was in the band with the girlfriend and the guys. Let me get lit up. Give me 5 years like that. I'll let you kill me at the end of the 5 years, but give me those 5 years. Instead, I get a big book and a sponsor and a home group and a series of actions that didn't seem like a good idea until after I took them. And I'm here all these years later, and I know something. I don't know a lot. And everything I know from my experience. I know that Alcoholics Anonymous is not designed to get you to quit drinking. There's nowhere in this book that even suggests it. As a matter of fact, it says time and time again, you can't, can you? Lack of power is your dilemma. You have no mental defense against the first drink. The most powerful desire not to drink to us is of no avail. Self-knowledge doesn't even help us. It's time. It spends a third of the working text trying to sell me on the idea you can't quit drinking. Alcoholics Anonymous is not about getting you to quit drinking. You want to quit drinking, punch a cop. You're going to quit for a little while. Alcoholics Anonymous is designed to do one thing and one thing only. To turn the juice back on. To give me what I secretly desire in my heart. The freedom. It's designed slowly and incrementally through a series of actions that I will take the rest of my life to do something for me that I'd once found in alcohol. And if you know something, if you're like me, and AA doesn't do that for you, and all it does is keep you from taking the first drink, and you feel the way I feel when I don't take the first drink, like you're eventually like you're doing time. How long are you going to hang? How tough are you? You're going to be the guy that stays here and doesn't drink, God damn it, for 15 years and then shoots himself in the head? Or are you going to be the guy who switches to gambling? You're going to be the guy who sits in a folding chair in front of a computer and looks at porno for 10 hours a day? You're the guy that shops himself into bankruptcy? The guy who gets on medication or switches to drugs? Or are you going to be the guy who drinks again or kills himself? But if you're like me, you won't stay in a state of abstinence the way you are in a state of abstinence if nothing changes for very long. And it doesn't matter how much you want to not drink again. So we have a program that's designed to change us from the inside out. It starts in here. One of the greatest things I do with a guy I sponsor is to spend the time with him to see if he's really convinced and is conceited to his innermost self. Is he one of us? We have enough people coming around Alcoholics Anonymous that really aren't here all the way. The guys I work with, I won't work with them unless they're a real alcoholic and they know it. And consequently, I end up working with guys that are just like me, which makes us a big pack of very, very ill people. God shows us how to create the fellowship we crave. I have a thing coming up in May with the guys I sponsor. It's a weekend. Sometimes I'll be around a bunch of the guys I work with and people. I feel close to people in Alcoholics Anonymous with a level of intimacy that is beyond anything I could ever have imagined. Ever. And I remember the feeling like I was dying of loneliness. I remember standing on that bridge because I don't fit anywhere, drunk no more, and the magic of alcohol's worn off, and I don't fit anywhere sober, really. And I'm tired of pretending. And Alcoholics Anonymous has changed that for me. And tomorrow morning, we're going to start the process. I'll share my experiences as honestly as I can. I'd like to do some stuff with some questions and answers tomorrow because you guys will stretch me with that. Because you won't give me a chance to think about what I'm saying. You'll just fire something at me, and I like that. It gives God a chance to work. And so tomorrow morning, we're going to start the process. How do you turn the juice back on? And with that, let's break, and we'll see you back here at 9 a.m. We have a talk from a trustee in the morning, I think, and then we'll start right after that.
Thank you, Bob. Registration will open tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. And the conference starts at 9 a.m. with Dr. John Fransom, a Class A non-alcoholic trustee of the General Service Board of Alcoholics Anonymous, who will talk briefly before Bob speaks. Now, for all